Hello and welcome. This is Michael Bohm with Youth Apologetics Training. Have you ever heard of the idea that Christianity copied ancient mystery religions? It's very popular on the internet today. In fact, there is a very popular movie on the internet called Zeitgeist, which is quite wacky in its theories and easily debunked. But it speaks of this copying of mystery religions very convincingly. It's very persuasive. And if a person didn't know any better, they would fall for this hook, line, and sinker. So today we're going to talk about, did Christianity copy mystery religions? I got some points that I pulled off intolerance.org that agrees with the idea of Christianity copying mystery religions. And this would be a nice way to kick off this series and just get a feel for what people are saying. And by the way, they say that Christianity copied themes like resurrection from the dead, virgin birth, communion, baptism, and the birth of Christ, and different themes like that. And we will go through and refute all of it. None of it's true. It's actually easily debunked. But if you didn't know any better, it's pretty convincing unless you have actually been through the material. So anyway, let's look at some of these points that intolerance.org has brought to the table here. I might throw in a couple of my own comments along the way. Number one, many early Christians celebrated Jesus' birthday on January 6th. Armenian Christians still do. In Alexandria, in what is now Egypt, the birthday of their god-man, Aeon or Ion, I'm not even sure how to pronounce that, was also celebrated on January 6th. Really quick point here. It doesn't matter what traditions people carry. Jesus' birthday is not in the Bible, guys. It's not. Let's move on. Christians and most pagans eventually celebrated the birthday of their god-man on December 25th. And that's true. Us Christians, we celebrate Jesus' birthday on December 25th. There's actually several ancient myth gods that also have their birth celebration on December 25th. Anyway, it's certainly true that there are several god myth gods who celebrate their birth on December 25th. The Bible doesn't say that Jesus was born on December 25th. That is a tradition that came much later, sometime around the time of the life of Constantine, so somewhere around 325 or so. Anyway, let's move on. According to an ancient Christian tradition, Christ died on March 23rd and resurrected on March 25th. These dates agree precisely with the death and resurrection of Attis. Folks, Jesus died during Passover. That's just a matter of history. And there are both Christian and non-Christian historical sources that attest to that. Anyway, let's move on. The most important sacrament was a ritual meal of bread and wine which symbolized the God-man's body and blood. His followers were accused of engaging in cannibalism. That's a little vague, and I'm not sure where they're going with that. It's okay. We are going to go through each one of these alleged God-men later in the series and talk about how they're similar, how they're different, what is the date of this particular faith, and so on and so forth, and nothing to worry about here. Early Christians initiated converts in March and April by baptism. Mithraism initiated their new members at this time as well. Folks, that is a tradition. It's not prescribed in the Bible. Therefore, we really don't have to worry about it, if it's even true at all. Next point. Early Christians were naked when they were baptized. After immersion, they then put on white clothing and a crown. They carried a candle and walked in a procession to a basilica. Followers of Mithra were also baptized naked, but put on white clothing and a crown and walked in a procession to the temple. However, they carried torches. Nowhere in the Bible does it say to get naked and get baptized. I'm sorry, but it's not there. Whether this happened or not, it probably did. I don't doubt that. People always want an excuse to get naked. But Nowhere in the Bible does it say to do that. And the fact that they walk to a basilica, if this is in fact true, suggests to me that it has something to do with the Catholic Church, because they're the ones that have the basilicas. Moving on. At Pentecost, the followers of Jesus were recorded as speaking in tongues. At Trophonius and Delos, the pagan priestess also spoke in tongues. They appeared to speak in such a way that each person present heard her words in the observer's own language. Yes, on Pentecost, the followers of Jesus did speak in new tongues. And is there a counterfeit version of tongues? There actually is. So it is what it is there. Let's move on. It doesn't prove that Christianity copied these ancient mystery religions. It doesn't prove that at all. Anyway, moving on. An inscription to Mithras reads, "He who will not eat of my body and drink of my blood, so that he will be made one with me and I with him, the same shall not know salvation." 1 John 6:53 and 54. Jesus is said to have repeated this theme, "Except ye eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, ye have no life in you. Whoso eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day." We will get into this Mithras character. And don't you guys admit, at first blush, this sounds fairly convincing. We'll get into that. I'm going to leave some of these for later because it just makes it more fun. Anyway, the Bible records that Jesus was crucified between two thieves. One went to heaven and the other to hell. To Mithras mysteries, a common image showed Mithras flanked by two torchbearers, one on either side. One held a torch pointed upwards, the other downwards. This symbolized ascent to heaven or descent to hell. Woo-hoo. Let's move on. In Attis, a bull was slaughtered while on a perforated platform. This is so gross. The animal's blood flowed down over an initiate who stood in a pit under the platform. The believer was then considered to have been born again. Poor people could only afford a sheep, so were literally washed in the blood of the Lamb. This practice was interpreted symbolically by Christians. We're going to get to that one later too. There were many additional points of similarity between Mithraism and Christianity. Augustine even declared that the priests of Mithraism worshiped the same God as he did. We'll get to that later. Followers of both religions celebrated a ritual meal involving bread. It was called a missa in Latin or mass in English. That's Catholicism, but anyway, we do have communion. Both of the Catholic Church and Mithraism had a total of 7 sacraments. That's interesting. And January 6th was originally the festival in which the followers of Mithra celebrated the visit of the Magi to their newborn God-man. The Christian Church took it over in the 9th century. Okay, we're going to get into a lot of this, all of it, in the next days. I'm not sure how long the series will go, but I have a feeling it's going to be a longer one. I did a previous teaching on logical fallacies, and I talked about the genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy is basically when you basically reject an argument simply because of its source. And in this case, they're rejecting Christianity because they believe the source of Christianity is ancient mystery religions. I'm going to read something that I believe it's Sean McDowell said, and I think it's a really good quote, and I think it illustrates this genetic fallacy point quite well. He says, "Parallels prove nothing. What if I told you about a British ocean liner that could carry 3,000 passengers, had a top cruising speed of 24 knots, and had an inadequate number of lifeboats? What if I told you that this ocean liner hit an iceberg on its maiden voyage, tore a hole in its side of the ship, and sank along with 2,000 passengers? Most likely you would think this was the Titanic, but you'd be mistaken. I'm describing the Titan, a fictional ship described in Morgan Robertson's book, Wreck of the Titan, Buccaneer Books, New York, 1898. It was written 14 years before the sinking of the Titanic. While the similarities between the two accounts are striking, they do nothing to undermine the historical evidence for the Titanic. Likewise, even if pagan myths existed before the time of Christ, this would not undermine the historical evidence for Jesus' miraculous life, death, and resurrection. Parallels alone are inconclusive. All right, so we've established the fact that even if the mystery religions did, in fact, come before the time of Christ, which they didn't, but let's say they did, and let's say all of these parallels were very striking, were very convincing, which they're not, would that prove that Christianity came from the mystery religions? Absolutely not. I would grant that perhaps it would be tempting to think that way, but it doesn't prove anything. All right, let's pull this together and conclude. We have several ancient mystery religion gods: Marduk, Osiris, Attis, Adonis, Dionysus, Mithras, and Tammuz, to name a few, who have resurrection parallels, who have virgin birth parallels, baptism, communion parallels, salvation, born-again type shadows and types. Friends, this is nothing to worry about. We're going to go through each one of these gods one by one and explain exactly when this mystery religion popped up and what they actually believe. We're going to start off with tomorrow by looking at an overview of the subject a little more and talking about all of these gods together, followed by a one-by-one closer look at each one of these gods, showing you why the parallels don't work, the timing doesn't work, and there's so many problems with this whole theory. This is Michael Bohm, Youth Apologetics Training. Look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Come out to the website, youthapologeticstraining.com, and say hi. I'd love to talk to you guys. Love you, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.